All right, let's dive into one of the greatest engineering feats of the ancient world, the Roman aqueducts. Now, these weren't just pipes. They were the absolute lifeblood that allowed a city to become an empire. But the most incredible part of this whole story, it's probably the part you've never even seen. So do me a favor. When I say Roman aqueduct, what's the first image that pops into your head? I'm gonna bet it's this majestic bridge of stone arches stretching across a sunny Italian valley, right? It's the picture on the postcard, it's what we all think of. And it's beautiful, no doubt, but it's not the whole story, not even close. Because this is the reality. Look at this. Those magnificent bridges we all picture, they account for less than 20% of the entire system. So where's the rest? Well, a whopping 80% of this incredible network was completely hidden, buried deep underground. Rome basically built hundreds of miles of secret, man-made rivers right under everyone's feet. So today, we're going to follow the water. We'll start with why Rome had such a massive water problem in the first place. Then we'll go underground to check out those secret rivers. We'll get into the genius of how they engineered it all using just gravity, see how the water was actually shared in the city, bust a few big myths, and wrap it all up with a legacy that, well, you won't believe it's still going today. Okay, first things first. Why? Why go to all this unbelievable trouble? Carving miles of tunnels, building enormous bridges. Why not just, use the giant river that runs right through the city? It's a really fair question, and the answer really is all about scale. See, at its peak, Rome was home to 1 million people. Now, that might not sound like a huge number to us today, but in the ancient world, that was a megacity on a scale that had never been seen before. And a city that big creates some very, very big problems. And problem number one was their local water source, the Tiber River. With 1 million people, their industry, their waste, all of it was going into the river. To put it gently, the Tiber was disgusting. It was basically a giant open sewer. And the Romans, who were obsessed with cleanliness and public health, knew that drinking that water was just asking for a plague. They needed fresh water and lots of it. And when I say lots, I mean a truly mind-boggling amount. To supply the city's thousands of public fountains, its famous public baths, and the fancy homes of the rich, Rome needed over 200 million gallons of clean spring water every single day. And they had to get it from miles away, from springs up in the mountains, all without a single pump, engine, or electrical grid. So how in the world did they pull that off? Well, this brings us right back to the real heart of the system, those secret underground rivers. The Romans became absolute masters of tunneling, carving these huge channels through miles of solid rock, creating a massive subterranean water highway completely invisible to the world above. And this wasn't just a random choice. It was a series of brilliant decisions. Building underground kept the water ice cold and fresh from the spring. It protected their precious water supply from being poisoned or diverted by enemies. It prevented the hot Mediterranean sun from evaporating it. And, maybe most importantly, it meant they didn't have to cut through and disrupt miles and miles of valuable farmland. It was just an incredibly elegant and secure solution. But okay, how do you get water to travel for 50 miles through a dark tunnel with no pumps to push it? Well, the answer is the one invisible, unstoppable force that governed this whole project: gravity. You really have to think of the entire aqueduct system as one enormous, perfectly engineered, city-sized waterslide. And this really gets to the heart of the challenge. The slope, the gradient, had to be perfect. If you made it too steep, the water would turn into an angry pressure washer, moving so fast it would just erode and destroy the channels over time. But if you made it too flat, you'd just get a sad little puddle that didn't go anywhere. The flow had to be gentle, constant, and unstoppable. So how did they get that precision over dozens of miles of rough terrain? They used this amazing and deceptively simple tool called the chorobates. It was basically a 20-foot-long wooden table with a little groove carved in the top. The engineers would fill that groove with water, and poof, they had a giant ancient spirit level. By using this, they could measure and maintain an incredibly slight, consistent gradient, sometimes just a drop of a few feet over an entire mile. It's not high-tech, but boy, was it effective. Okay, so tunnels work great when you're going through a hill, but what happens when you get to a deep valley? You can't exactly tunnel through thin air. Now, sometimes they'd build one of those famous bridges, but for really deep valleys, that just wasn't practical. So the Romans developed something else, something that was basically a hydraulic roller coaster. It's called an inverted siphon, and it is just a masterpiece of applied physics. Here's how it works. The water would flow into these massive sealed lead pipes on one side of the valley. Gravity would pull it all the way down to the bottom, building up an incredible amount of pressure. And then that pressure would literally force the water all the way back up the other side, almost to the same height it started at. It works just like a giant U-shaped tube you'd see in a science class, except the Romans built them on the scale of a mountain range. So after traveling for miles and miles underground, maybe crossing a bridge or plunging through a siphon, the water finally arrives at the city. But the job's not done yet. Now you have to get all those millions of gallons to the people. And that's where the Castellum Aquae, or water castle, came in. This was the grand central station for all of Rome's water. Inside the Castellum, the water was split into this brilliant three-tiered system that tells you everything you need to know about Roman priorities. Check this out. The lowest pipes, which got water first and lost it last, always fed the public fountains. This guaranteed that the everyday citizen always had access to drinking water. The middle pipes fed the public baths, a cornerstone of Roman culture. And only the highest pipes, the first to run dry in a shortage, supplied the private homes of the wealthy. So in a drought, the rich people lost their running water first. It was public works at its absolute best. Now, of course, with any ancient technology, a few myths pop up over the centuries. And when you talk about Roman water, there are two things that always come up: lead pipes and, well, the not-so-clean side of things. You've definitely heard this one before, right? The theory that the Romans used so many lead pipes that the ruling class slowly went mad from lead poisoning, which eventually caused the entire empire to collapse. It's a very neat, tidy story. There's just one little problem. It's almost certainly not true. And here's the reason why. The water coming from those mountain springs was very hard water. It was full of minerals, mostly calcium carbonate. As that mineral-rich water flowed through the lead pipes, the calcium would rapidly build up on the inside, forming a thick, hard crust. This crust is called sinter, and effectively, the pipes were self-lining themselves with a layer of rock, which acted as a natural barrier, preventing the water from ever really touching the lead. So, while they probably weren't poisoning themselves with lead, let's not get too romantic about Roman hygiene. Yeah, the public baths were amazing social hubs, but that water wasn't chlorinated and it wasn't changed very often. And archaeological studies of the drains from these baths have confirmed they were basically a paradise for all sorts of nasty intestinal parasites. So you could get squeaky clean on the outside, but you might just be picking up some unwanted microscopic friends on the inside. Which brings us to our final point, and honestly, the most mind-blowing part of this whole story: the sheer, unbelievable longevity of this engineering. I mean, we build things today and we hope they last 50, maybe 100 years. The Romans built infrastructure that has lasted for 2,000 years. Just think about this one example, the Aqua Virgo aqueduct. It was finished way back in 19 BC under Emperor Augustus. And today, more than 2,000 years later, a restored version of that exact same aqueduct is still working. It's the system that feeds one of the most famous landmarks in the world, the Trevi Fountain in Rome. When you stand there watching that water gush out, you are watching an ancient Roman river still flowing after 2 millennia. It's just staggering to think about. So I'll just leave you with this question. The Romans, with really simple tools and an incredible grasp of the physical world, built something so well that it outlasted their own empire by centuries. So it makes you wonder, what are we building today? What piece of our modern engineering, a skyscraper, a bridge, a data network, do you honestly think will still be serving its purpose in the year 4024? It's a pretty humbling thought, isn't it? Thanks for joining this explainer.